Good afternoon. This Township of Selwyn Draft 2026 budget meeting is going to be starting. It's Thursday, February 5th, 2026. We respectfully acknowledge that we are on the treaty and traditional territory of the Mississauga and Anishinaabe. We offer our gratitude to the First Peoples for their care for and teachings about our earth and our relations. May we honor those teachings. Please observe a moment of silence so that council, staff, and members of the public can quietly reflect on our duty to the community that we are trying to serve. Thank you. Members of the public, staff, presenters, and members of council, please be advised that meetings are broadcast and recorded and made available on the internet. All right, so is there a declaration of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof? None. Were there any questions that came in through question period and Deputy Clerk?
No questions were submitted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so we will go to Robert Kelly, who is going to be giving us a report on building fee update. Robert.
Good afternoon, Mayor Senes and Council. My report that's before you today is a report that is asking Council to consider and subject to any revision endorse the proposed building permit fee rates as detailed in the report for the purpose of the required public consultation. We're set to have our mandatory public meeting for the increase in permit fees on February 24th. And as part of this council's being involved as well as our previous council in changing us originally from construction valuation percentage of construction valuation determination for building permit fees to area calculations. That was based on a recommendation report that was presented to council in 2020 by Performance Concepts Consulting. The council at the time directed staff to move forward in that direction. And in 2022, the department instituted area calculation fee determinations for our building permit fee model. Following that implementation and at council's direction, we reported in 2024 on the status of the implementation of that fee because it was a significant overhaul of the way we'd previously done our calculation to support the services that the building department provides. In 2024, due to economic conditions and the change in fee structure, we had predicted a 25% shortfall in our revenue to support the building department. At that time, we had proposed an increase of 50% of that projected gap, which was a 12.5% increase to our building permit fees. That was ultimately approved and implemented. And with that increase in implementation, we were directed to follow up at the beginning of 2026 to see if those adjustments to the fee schedule were adequate to support our department. Part of that was an expectation that we would see an increased amount of construction activity. What we found and what the basis of bringing this forward beyond just a CPI increase is that there's two major cost centers where we do not achieve anything close to cost recovery. And those two significant cost centers are on enforcement and the amount of staff time that takes, which is driven by complaints that we receive at the township. And previously we had no mechanism to recover any of the costs for the massive amounts of time that enforcement does take. So part of this is to introduce fees for that. The other cost center that we found that we hadn't previously focused on was interior alterations and renovations. So anytime an existing building envelope's being modified, whether it be the exterior walls by the addition of windows and doorways to complete renovation of floor areas. So we weren't even achieving in a lot of cases, our minimum building permit fee when those were considered. So essentially, we weren't even recovering the administrative, let alone the plans examination and inspection costs that are incurred by our building department when we're handling those type of permits. Attached to the report is the rationale document, which breaks out some of that into greater detail. And then additionally, the proposed fee schedule was included for your review. And if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't want to preempt my colleagues. But and I thank you very much for your report. I have a question and then I have a statement to make. So are any of these fees that you're talking about in this report going to be embedded in the budget that we're going to be dealing with today?
Through you, Mayor Senes, I used extremely conservative numbers in my building revenues budget based on predominantly the increase in the enforcement component of my fees.
All right. I personally don't feel comfortable with what is in front of us without the knowledge of what our adjoining municipalities are doing. We want to remain competitive. I'll take it back to 2020. I was on council when we went through this exercise. And one of the reasons we did that, had a consultant in, was because council was receiving complaints that we were the most expensive in the county when it came to building fees. And we want to ensure that we don't get into that position again. So I would request my colleagues support an amendment to the recommendation that is before us by removing the second paragraph that says we are going to endorse it at this point in time until we receive a report that shows the comparatives of the townships and the city in the county. And that would come back to us at the February the 26th meeting, and we can then make the decision as to whether we want to go forward with the changes that are before us now. And I have given you all a copy of what I'd like to replace the second paragraph with, which is that staff provide council with a comparison of building permit fees in the other lower tier municipalities in the county of Peterborough and the city of Peterborough for consideration as part of the public meeting being held to consider the proposed fees. And then it continues on that the prescribed public meeting would take place on February the 24th. So I don't know if my colleagues support this. If they do, I'd like someone to second it. Councillor Henry. And is there any discussion on what I'm requesting? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Now, I'll come back to my colleagues. Do you have, yes?
Sorry, Madam Mayor, who moved it? I know that Brian seconded it, but I didn't get.
Well, it's an amendment to a recommendation. Is that what class is a motion?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so to keep things in order, I pass the gavel over to Deputy Mayor Black. We'll do it again.
So
Yes. I'm not going to repeat it. You've all seen it.
Do you have it? I don't, but if you can send
I'll
it to
do
us,
it.
that's fine. Yep,
Yeah.
no worries.
Thank you very much. All right, so now I'll pass it back to my colleagues. Is there anything else or questions that you would like to pose to Robert with regards to the report? Councillor Koulos.
Thank you, through you. I just want a bit more detail on what is included in interior, because I read that and I got scared. I'm like, if I paint the inside, am I gonna get called on? And then how are we gonna enforce that, right? Like, it's not like you have pictures of the inside of my house and know what color I'm painting the inside or, yeah. And even the idea of like, if I replace my siding, is that covered in this as well? There was an exterior here too, but interior was my main concern. So yeah, if you could speak more to what that includes or excludes.
Through you, Mayor Senes, when we refer to interior alterations and renovations, oftentimes what we find is individuals like to remove either load-bearing partitions or open rooms up or do a combination of rooms or relocate where their plumbing fixtures are located. A large majority of these end up being in kitchen areas, but also we can get other areas that get included with that, and it could be things as simple as removing a partition wall and opening up an area to put new cabinets in place, and maybe they'll change some of their exterior wall penetrations, open up new areas to create larger windows. Anything that generates either a structural or design of rooms review under the Ontario Building Code would trigger that. Although the act does state any change in materials, I'm not aware of any building department that focuses on change of exterior siding or paint without. The caveat to that would be if you're putting an increased insulation value or an insulated siding, or you're adding rigid insulation before you put your siding on, in those cases, then we would be looking for a permit.
No, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, we've already received a report, so on to the next presenter, who's Adam Tobin.
Thanks through you, Madam Mayor. As you're aware, through our capital budget presentation in the fall, there's 3 large water and wastewater projects scheduled for 2026 in Lakefield. 2 of which are funded significantly through the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, the Green Infrastructure Stream Fund. What I'm coming to council with is, as we finalize the detailed design of these drawings and start to work on the tenders, I'm just asking council permission to go ahead and issue those tenders and then to come back to council at a later date with a recommendation for award of those 3 projects.
Any questions? Adam. Have some. Moved by Deputy Mayor Black, seconded by Council Boyko, all in favor. That is carried. Thank you very much. And now we will move on to the main event today, Mr. Van.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to council for holding a special meeting today to consider, I guess you'd say, an interim approval of the 2026 taxation and area rate budget before we take it forward for final approval. The presentation will be in the same order as it was the document that was circulated.
Do you have your mic?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So the presentation, I'm just going to go through the document that was circulated at the end of January. And of course, as normal, I'll add some comments, pause for questions. The management team's here for sure. I'm hoping it can be as interactive as other years. I've had some questions of clarification from members of council. I've encouraged those councillors that they feel that they should help with the public understanding that they were brought up today as well. The management team's available to respond, and as we know, we've got some folks online as well as here in person, and can all provide some additional information as we go. So still just kind of carrying on some opening comments. As we go through the cover report, which is provided in the binder, it outlines a recommendation that I'll be looking for some discussion on near the end of today's meeting. All the township departments have participated in the preparation of the document. Provided their input, lots of back and forth this year. The library board has approved their respective draft budget. Township draft. I'll be reporting back to the board on that at our next regular meeting. We did have some deficits in 2025, and the arenas, which we had anticipated when we approved the budget last year, in some instances good news there. We did have a significant deficit in winter control. I'll talk to that when we get to that in some of the part of the presentation. Fairly significant, in terms of its use of all the reserves and carrying forward a deficit as well. So it's reflective of what we're living with today. There's some capital items, some that were updated at year end. We've updated the narrative, which is included in the package. Probably still have some additional handouts to provide the council before the final budget is approved, but we'll talk about that today. Fire changes definitely successfully with the PPE grant. We chatted at the last meeting, council, about the stock pumper purchase and moving ahead, so that's changed on our schedule. And right up to this week, we've been modifying the public works fleet review. Adam and I discussing some of those purchases, Adam reaching out to some suppliers and getting an idea of delivery times and things like that. So we'll have an updated schedule on that as well. But as I mentioned, just hoping we can have a good thorough discussion today before we move this on to next steps. What was that here? Yep, thanks. So yeah, this has been a challenging budget year. Management team, well, and I think council too has been fighting various bugs and health issues, and so it's a reminder that we've got life to deal with as well, right, as we go through this process. But it's also a year that's extremely active in terms of our operations of things that we have planned. A bunch of new staffing proposed in the budget, session management, related training, heavy HR activity going on. Throw in the fact that there's a municipal election later this year. We've got some opportunities for new services that are provided in the budget. And we've had just a crazy winter at the first part of this year and then the end of last year, and then we're still going through it this year. From a capital perspective, got some major projects, over $5 million worth of investment. And I would say one in particular, the Innis Marina Forward, is the type of investment that happens once in a generation. So significant capital investments. So a heavy year, and therefore a bunch of extra time spent on the budget this year. I would say that the package that went out to council last week and then in various stages this week is not the type of polished report, polished document that I'd like to typically circulate, but we've always been of the mind to get the information out to council beforehand to review, making sure everything fits and everything works. And I appreciate any feedback I've received so far from the council. So we'll dive into our budget cycle. We're getting near the end of this budget cycle for the tax budget. And just to make that point again, that we are in the final stages of process related to taxation and area rates. Also working on various aspects of our audit process and finalizing a 2025 year-end number. And once again, they're working through some new staffing and there's some different assumptions that folks have as we work through that. And so it's just an eye opener as we go through and to show that succession management is ongoing throughout the year. We'll swing over and ramp up water and sewer budgets. I don't know how to spend some more time on that. And then definitely our audit work will continue through into March when they show up on site for our audit. So we're doing our best to get back on track with those timelines. Council will realize we've not yet approved the 2024 financials. There are a number of PSAB guidelines that have changed over the last couple of years with respect to building permit revenues and different allocations with respect to what is an unfunded liability and where that shows up on the bank, things like that. So I think the first quarter will really take us a long way to getting there, and then our second quarter we should have back on track. Okay, so as I noted in the past, municipal government's got very limited number of areas in which we can generate revenue. So obviously one is assessment, We'll go through a number of slides here, and take a look at we're hoping to bring in some revenue this year. Assessment's a key driver behind the tactic. And just before I get into the slide, just did want to note, I had 1.23 on the residential classes. It actually should be 1.1. This slide for the residential class, so that's the being there on my behalf. So our CBA has been frozen at the 2016 value. And that's, well, since a provincial policy delay been into effect. And so we're really just looking at our new growth over the last year. It's a little over 1.09%. And it's really no surprise that residential is our biggest component there. It's just 92% of it's up at this point in time. Maybe swap it over.
Right.
How's that? Thank you. Okay, so just moving on from assessment. So assessment yields taxes. We've been very fortunate to receive also a variety of provincial and federal grants. And the narrative goes into that under the grants tab. It outlines the span of the grants. We tend to focus on unconditionals, but there's a lot of those in there. One component with respect to the Ontario Municipal Partnership Grant, as we look through the excuse me, through the year-end financials, we knew we were going to have deficits at both of the arenas, and we thought we were going to have a deficit in our parks area as well. Pleased to say that we did not. We're really close to what we didn't have, but that it is noted on there that we did. Where I do want to point out is instead of parks, we want to put in winter control. Because not only did we use up all of our grant, for all of our reserve rather we had, we also had to dip into deficit and we're going to pull that out of the Ontario Municipal Partnership in 2026. So I'll go through the tab in a little bit more detail. Also really just want to ensure the council that staff are actively seeking out grant opportunities and across really all areas, federal, provincial, but also jurisdictional. A lot of foundational grants and things like that as well. And so I think I mentioned every year, but Megan and Angie and our general government department and working with any of the applicable managers really do a great job. And you can see as we work through this some of the different grants that conditional grants in particular that we're able to get. That's really because of the work that they do. So I'll just take a couple of slides and I will go through some of the heavy hitters and then we'll maybe take a look through some of the other more specific grants. So the partnership fund actually had an increase of 93.5 over 2025. That's an unconditional grant that council can use as they see fit. OC had a decrease down to about $250,000. Both of these, what I would classify as unconditional. OC is a little bit more refined in that it's asset management based, but it can use to fund infrastructure and like that. So we're definitely using that for capital in 2026. And one of the handouts that I provide to council before final budget approval is a one-pager that we typically put together to outline where the partnership fund is spent. So some of those areas we speak to in the document, but there's a nice one page that we put together, so council should have that available. Moving from provincial to the federal government, back into the Canada Community Building Fund, which used to be the Fast Act revenue. A little over $610,000, so no change this year. It's an unconditional grant as well, and we have earmarked it for road reconstruction, for typically resurfacing or microsurfacing, things like that. It is going to increase in 2027 a little bit more, $635,000. So, and that's a national adjustment per capita. You go through that every couple of years. So we do know that in 2027, there's maybe another $25,000 coming that way. Just to look through the binder and number of different grants, as I mentioned, the community sport recreation infrastructure grants from the help us out in this more, as well as the Hydro Community Investment Fund. Fortunate to receive a Trillium Foundation grant for the waterfront park. We're talking about ISIP, but I might talk about ISIP a little bit more when we get the water and sewer budget, because that's helping us out there in a big way with our standpipes. It's already up to 7%. I brought up the council before the population numbers, and so there was some reporting back on that. But that's included on page 4 of 7 in the grant highlights area. And once again, Megan and you spent some time on that, and we're pleased to see actually it was $100,000 was the level, more than 20,000. 20,000 we thought that it might just be my age, maybe that's not so important anymore. 100,000 is now the number to look at, other than the Trillium Foundation. The Trillium Foundation still has to put off $20,000. 20,000 population. I've had some questions from councilors about grants that were awaiting announcement. So we are applying for 4 student grants this year. Administration, a couple of them, and one in the library this year. And we've also had good support in the library from volunteer model and donations for the support of the original funding for the students there. The Trans-Canada Trail, Mike and his crew working with the Public Works, every piece of that, with that, and the SNP ward along the Trans-Canada for that. That could be for brushing, could be for a little bit of maybe probably with their different things like that, but we're involved in the unit. It's been around 500 and then we got some other applications and still haven't heard from yet. That's all outlined in that tab, and yeah, we remain hopeful on some of them. It's been really successful in a number of different areas with the grants, and it's definitely one of those things that when a new grant is released, that information and that a little bit of a brief about the grant to circulate to the management team. It's always a bit of a conference to figure out if we get to apply for, what are we going to grants at. And I will say that in recent years, it's typically Megan that would do that. We would actually reach out to the funder as well and have a dialogue with them and they're discussing, we've got these 4 programs, what do you think is going to be the best one? And we have to keep in mind that most of the time, those individuals put a program in place because they want to see funding provided. They want it to be successful. So they can only provide so much information, but they definitely point us in a direction where we should go.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks for that beyond the budget information. I think that's it's important, thinking forward and moving forward through the next census. Good possibility we're going to hit that 20 number. I know on my road there's twice as many people living there now than there were in the last census. So in your estimation, I mean, there's some obviously we still qualify under 100,000, some under 15, over 15, less than 20. In your kind of estimation, will it be positive if we go over 20 or negative? I know we're going to lose some, but does it make us eligible for funds that we're currently not eligible for? Is there anything you could think of? I know it's a pretty exhaustive list you provided, but are there ones there that we could apply for if we're over 20?
I really can't think of any that all of a sudden, I think what your question is, are there going to be new funding opportunities that would open up because we're not?
Yeah.
And I don't believe so.
No.
I do know that sometimes when the grant offerings and at the end of the day, the folks to get it are the big things. It's because they have bigger reach. So it's the Londons and the Niagara Falls and those to get it. Sometimes, ours may look very small on things of the overall. So if they've got limited funds, that's something to do. But I can't think of any funding opportunities, all of a sudden, there's like 3 or 4 new grants available to us. And
Yeah, it's just unfortunate. We're kind of in that gray area. Once you get over that 20, we don't qualify for the small community loans, but we also aren't going to compete with the city of Toronto for grants either. So puts us in a bit of a gray area.
So definitely, Madam Mayor, when we see grants that tend to focus on small urban or rural or things like that, we're all over that for sure. And I think these are just good conversations with the folks. And you can sometimes read between the lines and show the really good opportunity here, or probably not, but we still, yeah.
Actually, the analogy I would use is we will go from being a big fish in a little pond to a little fish in a big pond. That's how I always did. Councillor Henry.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Senes. Our budget is definitely very grant dependent. Maybe to see if we ever lose one of these or if the funding changes after a provincial election. With that moving forward, when we do break the cusp of 20,000, do we have a prediction of when that would happen? And then moving forward, what portion of grants are we going to have to subsidize? Because sometimes municipalities do have to match dollar to dollar on grants.
Sure, Vicky, through to you, Madam Mayor. So the projection is that by maybe 2031, we'll be on that $20,000 or 20,000 population. I keep saying dollars, sorry about that. 20,000 population. But that's based on some projections. We've always tried to take a look at reserve levels and things like that. So that's where our matching dollars come from. So if we're in a 50%, a lot of the grants, if it's a large program, it's like a third, or it's 40% beds, 33. So we've always typically looked at reserves as our matching contribution. So that if all of a sudden grants either dropped off or new grants came available, we would just have to start to increase tax rates crazy just so that we could qualify for the grants. So that's kind of our votes. Yeah, but it is one of those things. Once we, 100,000 tends to be more the level that we need to be concerned about. We're not going to hit there for quite some time, but 2031 roughly is the 20,000. The dollars. Okay, I'll move on to capital budget and our investments there. First, we met and had a specific meeting to map out our capital program in November. We've had a few carryovers, but for the most part, this year we finished up most of our program. We do have some multi-year programs, obviously more on water and sewer, I think. But we will have some dollar impacts when we get to close our audit for this year. We included the capital program update in the binder. So that just goes through some of those changes. The obvious one would be the fire protection grant, which we have to help us with respect to the cancer causing prevention, you say, or cancer prevention building. So it's outlined in the binder. We have a number of facility improvements that are outlined. We've got our fire equipment and roads equipment purchases. With respect to the roads, as I mentioned, Adam and I have been working on that really right up until yesterday. So we will be distributing something in addition there. We're getting really close to the wire based on our budget at the end of 2026. But in checking with some of our suppliers, we realized that the one truck in particular, which is probably unlikely that we would have it in 2026. So that means probably half of that purchase, about $200,000, will be deferred. So that will be provided in the capital. And then, of course, we have some related road investments, and we look ahead to 2027 in that partnership. So the narrative highlights some of those areas. As I mentioned, we'll have some neat handouts there as well. And the public works fleet work, Adam and I did, I'd like to say Adam and I did a bunch of work. Adam's done a bunch of work. I just chat with Adam after. But Adam's done a ton of work on it. It's been a valuable exercise, really, the understanding of how this equipment is used, he's been able to convey to his staff that, if it can be extended, we should look at extending. Just because it's the oldest truck doesn't mean that's the truck that gets replaced. We need to look at kilometers, useful life, maintenance, history, those types of things. So making some major progress there. And we've got a plan in place that actually spans 25 years, but, I think we've got a little bit more work to do. We're working through that. We just need the suppliers and the cost to kind of stay relatively, I guess, affordable. And then we'll be able to work through this, but, you know, good work being done there. Before I leave this section, we did include in the binder, an update on the capital program as it relates to the climate lens tool. And, just because I like to hear Lily speak and she happened to be around today and I went and talked to her maybe like an hour beforehand, said, hey, do you want to talk to council? Maybe it would have been nice if I talked to her maybe on Monday or something like that. But, anyway, Lily's here to provide a bit of an update just on the next step of the climate lens tool and how we can maybe roll that out or incorporate it in some of the documentation we provide to council.
Thanks, Lane. Through you, Madam Mayor. So the township did develop a climate lens tool in 2024, and that tool includes a list of questions that helps staff consider climate change mitigation and adaptation in township projects. So just like how we now consider financial impacts, sometimes IT impacts for township projects, climate change in the environment is another consideration that we need to balance. The township piloted the tool in 2025 by applying it to our 2026 capital projects, and a summary highlighting some of the results of that assessment is included in the capital program updates. And so moving forward, the township plans to apply the climate lens tool to all capital projects ahead of budget time, and report the results of this on capital budget worksheets. So this will show that staff have considered how the project might be affected by climate change and how the project might be modified or managed to reduce any environmental impact.
Thanks very much on that. Just carry on over to one more slide on capital budget. Respect to pie chart of just where our investments are being made. Facilities on this one is super massive in comparison to other years, even though we do invest in our facility consistently, but this is because of the Innismore Arena project, so almost $2 million there. The majority of our investments are in facilities, roads, and roads equipment. And with the adoption of the budget, or at least moving today's budget process forward, the pie chart area for fire will grow. The stock pumper purchase will also be in there as well. So that's not in there yet. Not in this version, but so that slice of the pie, if you will get bigger as well. So with the program we put together at this point, just for tax supported, it's close to $6 million. Like I said, the Innismore Arena project is a generational investment, but still significant capital. Over the reserves, so we talked about assessment. It's going to give us taxes, our grants. Sometimes they have to be matching grants, capital investments. Here we go, and then on to reserve. So that was something that was circulated earlier this week. Lots of transfers in and out and impacts throughout the whole budget. It's a really key funding source for our capital investments. And then that way we can plan out our capital investments over a number of years. And if we also set aside funds for future years to protect the municipality against those unforeseen or unknown. And so the best example there would probably be the winter control contingency, which this year was just gone. So this is an overview of where the reserves have been since 2022. There's some working funds, specific reserves, which is by and large the largest section of our reserves, and then deferred revenue. So the total estimate by this year's end is about 12.5 million. So that specific reserve area includes such as fire equipment, roads equipment, and facilities. So with respect to fire, it doesn't take, it looks like a big dive on our reserves, but when we look at even a stock pumper purchase at $750,000, $800,000, like start to see that we drop 1 million pretty quick. But then the goal is that over time that will build back up. That's what we're going through right now with the road construction equipment and that discussion. So aside from those capital items, also been funding for other more specific things. So we have an insurance contingency reserve if we happen to have a big large claim. And we did have a winter control contingency reserve. It's now 0 as well. So that's another reason why it's that reserve level dropping as well. And keeping in mind, this is only tax related reserves. We also have reserves for water and sewer and woodland acre products as well. And so the reserves, as I mentioned before, just allows us to plan and takes out the peaks and valleys, and then makes the tax levy a little bit more manageable. So I think we have made fairly significant investments over the years in facilities, roads, and fire. And it is a good stable source of funding, and we're starting to plan things out. But later on, I will note a few areas where we've just not made major progress with respect to asset management, setting aside funds for assets, which significant dollar value in terms of structure and stormwater. I'll go into that in a little bit more. I just did want to note too that I had some questions about things there. So either the budget or the audit is always at a point in time, so we have to make that adjustment. So we lay things out, and I'll maybe council permit. I'm going to use a water and sewer example, but it's not about water and sewer. But a water and sewer example, but we would lay out maybe a major repair or something, and we're going to bring in reserve funds of $500,000, and then throughout the course of working with our engineers or laying out the work, something that's delayed, and maybe at the end of the year we only spent $100,000 instead of $500,000. So that $400,000 just this basically doesn't come out of reserve, or if it is in some instances if it's by additional grant, it would go into reserve. So in that instance, it would be what you call an unbudgeted reserve transfer, because it was a conservative revenue number, and then it didn't capitalize at the end of the year. That's one example. The other, of course, is with respect to interest rates, and I'll talk about that one with the general government. But back in this 2022, 2023, Bank of Canada made some decisions with respect to keeping inflation at a certain level, and so because of that, they basically increased rates as opposed to decreasing. So that had a positive impact on us because we had conservative revenue, and then all of a sudden it was like found money. Well, that found money, rather than spending it, we put it back in the reserve. At this point in time, or I should say throughout that period as well, we also made the decision to put a large group of our reserves into high interest savings account, and that it's just an extra 0.25% on all that money. So when we start putting $14 million there, an extra 0.25%, put it there. So I think that's why it maybe the auditors would have noted it, and maybe think this stuff is unbudgeted revenue, but in fact it was just money that came in that we were conservatively budgeting, and the money was greater through the budget. That might be the best. That's what we're saying. So it isn't that there are large amounts of unbudgeted reserves. It's just that we're conservative in our revenues, and if it's greater, we put it into the best way I can understand. Oh, the question from Admin.
That's right.
Thank you, through your Mayor Sanas. Speaking with the reserves and our weak reserve analysis that we're looking at, we state that reserve levels are significantly lower than ideal, but nothing's quantified for me to understand here. How low are they, and what are we comparing this benchmark, and when can we project it in number?
Okay, yeah, so there's a lot in that question. Yeah, so we, projected at the end of the year, we're going to close out our reserves about 12.5 million with respect to taxation. I've asked that question, we've had some really good discussion, with respect to what is the ideal level, and I talked about that with our audit. And there isn't really kind of a magic number. I'll go back to the comment I made before about a couple of key assets we don't have, are the any reserve, the structure basically being our bridges, all the major culvert. And also, stormwater, so you can think of every urban section of road that has underground stormwater. So those two areas we have virtually no knowledge in. So the only way that they get funded is through a grant, or I have to discuss with Adam how much can be shared with roads. So right off the bat, I would say, of course, I'm the treasurer, I'm going to say we don't have enough. Because I've already identified two major asset areas where we don't have any, and we should have more. Having said that, the reserves and the reserve use over the last 2 or 3 years has been a measured and well thought out reserve use. So we're not just drawing reserves down to keep our tax rate artificially low, because we're buying a fire truck, or we're buying $800,000 worth of public works equipment, different things like that. Ideally, we'll get to a spot, especially with the fire truck, we're just putting back into some of the fire truck stuff. We'll get to a point where all of a sudden that's not going to be available anymore. We're not going to need it and start to build back up. So I don't know if that's answers your question. I can't give you what is the ideal number, because I don't know it at this point in time. I do know that we have two major asset areas where we don't have any reserves, and we should have.
Thank you, through Mayor Sanders follow. Kind of answers the question, kind of totally did not. So if we have all our historical data of reserve use, is there no way that we could kind of have a middle ground where we understand we should have reserves in certain regions? Naturally, they're going to fluctuate, and there's naturally things like ice storms that are going to impact reserves as well that we can't foresee. So with the amount of time years that Selwyn Township's been going, there's no way that we can sort of track and model that.
Yeah, if you met Mary, that's a good question. I think the two sets of reserves. First of all, we have these contingency reserves, which I talked about. So I would have said, with respect to the contingency for winter control, we're in pretty good stead there. Traditionally, until this year, we may have had a winter where we had to use it all up. And so I'd come back to council and say, we used it all up. We didn't have to get into for any of that money, but we just used it all up. And then the next year, we recovered a little bit. But we had a really light first half of the winter, no ice storm, and then the heavy second half of the year, right? So we were able to have some money set aside. This year, with respect to winter control in particular, it's just heavy in the first part of the year, heavy at the end of the year, and in the middle we have the ice storm. And I know for me, I've never seen that department be $250,000 over budget that. So I would have said before, we're in pretty good shape. We have $100,000 in reserve, too bad. Yeah, so that was an anomaly for sure. With respect to insurance, we set up an insurance reserve a number of years ago for that very purpose, because we were concerned that there's more litigation, more things like that. And so at least we set it up so that we could cover a couple of deductibles. That was the thing. So we set that up. Exactly. Asset management, well, I've talked about it for a decade here at council. It is relatively new in the municipal world. And so those two key areas that I mentioned, we don't have sufficient reserves there. So that would go into the model. And I would say out of this whole budget document, one of, a disappointment that I would have personally is that we haven't been able to set aside sufficient amount for asset management. That it just isn't there. I know that there needs to be more money for asset management. And really, when we're looking at the levels that we're talking about here, we've started to make progress on equipment, fire in particular, and it's life saving. We started to make some progress with respect to roads in terms of road clearing, different things like that. But in terms of just all of the assets, we make good progress.
Thank you. So then follow up, just understand that obviously asset management. Do that. But, so it's our asset management then at risk?
Well, yeah, when you say asset management. That's- I guess how we manage our assets. At this point in time, we're not setting aside sufficient reserves. So if we had, for instance, a major failure of stormwater management system and we had to do something, then we'd be in a situation where we would have to borrow that money. Or, and so that money would either be borrowed internally if we can put together something, or we'd have to go externally. My recommendation would be we probably get infrastructure and first, and then we take a look at the banking, so that's what the money comes in. Because our debt level or asset annual repayment money is in a really good position, we would be able to borrow that money.
Thank you. Yes, that's one of the challenges of being at the municipal level of government is we're not the province of the feds and we just print money when we have a deficit. We actually have to be accountable here.
Thank you, through your Mayor Senes. Thanks for the explanation on the unbudgeted contribution back to reserve once everything settles through the audit, that moves back and forth. So, but that is a factor of the amount that we move in and out of reserve to balance the budget part, some overestimation, some underestimation. So it's really that sort of impact of what's happened through the year that determines what those numbers are. But that's a significant number. You know, the 23 was over almost 700,000. I'm not expecting to come up with 24, 25 today, but it is a significant number. So I just hoping there's an opportunity to maybe somehow tighten that up because that does impact what we're asking for tax rates in following years. So I do appreciate the answer. Couple of questions on the reserves. One is one of the biggest transfers to operating is the OPP contingency reserve, 208,000, going out a bit to cover the increase in cost, and I fully support that because those reserves are $1 million, so that makes a lot of sense. The increase in the Peterborough Police one was what, 57,000 or something like that. So why wouldn't you take it out of that reserve? Because that's almost at 1.2 million. Why would you not have done the same thing for that part of the budget to reduce our taxation by more than half?
Sure, thank you. Madam Mayor, to you. Yeah, so in this instance, it's just a bit of a rationale review. So the number that's coming out of the OPP reserve is for prior years deficits, you'd say, adjustments. With respect to Peterborough, it's current moving forward. And so I don't know, I couldn't actually say if it's a resolution of council, but it's more or less a direction from council that whatever the area rate is would be whatever the contract amount is that we pay. So, so in this instance, I was able to take money from the reserve to pay for prior year's adjustments. And then the area rate for OVP matches exactly what the contract is. And the same with respect to the Peterborough. If you draw from reserve for current increase or something going ahead, then we're behind next year as well. That with OPP, because it's a prior year adjustment, it's just we pull it out of reserve, it's taken care of, and then we move on. We're paying the area rate based on the contract. The other key point with the OPP is that I'm not sure it's next year, like this year, or the next year, but it's really to do with the wage adjustment. And so all of a sudden, that like it's over $200,000, but that number is going to come back down to very close because it's a retroactive wage adjustment. Let's go back to 2023. Yeah. So I think that number won't be as big even moving ahead. This could be part of the last year, but the moving ahead, it should be that big. Okay.
Yeah, no, thanks for the explanation. And it is a different, the OPB is always backfilling basically for the coming year, so I get that, the Peterborough one is, here's the budget for next year, but technically, we typically don't fund operations from reserves, but technically we're funding operations from reserves because it's just the backfill. Well, so, it just, that reserve, both those reserves are significantly higher than I think we'll ever require. The OPB contract now covers everything. So I'm not sure, other than these adjustments that we've had over the last few years, which, as you said, has been a wage adjustment thing. That's really because prior to that, it was more inflationary type increase. It should cover taxation. What would be the use of this reserve down the road? Is that something that could be transferred to the asset management? I know we talked quite a bit for Councillor Henry on the lack of money in certain parts of the asset management program. I think we've done a good job on police and public works as far as their capital budgets and using the and so on. Like, is there an opportunity to move some of that reserve into other areas to support the asset management program this year?
I guess you know that. Those two reserves definitely are more operational contingency reserves as opposed to set aside for a purpose. And because they're different area rates and they affect each of the parts of the municipality separately, I would say that they're probably not good candidates for that. And also the Peterborough one, while we pay the contract, the contingencies or things that could arise is a lot greater. Lot greater possibility that the municipality could be hurt with that charge, right?
Right.
Whereas the OPP, it's a little bit different setup as we. So those would be more contingency. And some of the other reserves, and we do need to look at a reserve policy a little bit closer. And that's also pointed out under community capacity building fund. That's something that they would say is the best practice as well. But some of those ones would be, say, we have an internet upgrade fund or something like that. Telecommunication. So that it was a reserve that was created when Peterborough Utilities took over the fiber that ran from Lakeville to the city. And so it was outside of the purchase price for the utility. There's a lot of back and forth, a lot of negotiation on that. And ultimately, they paid us money for that. Now that's specific to Lakeville because it's part of the Lakeville utility. But that would be one of those things as an example, if we looked at doing some type of internet in the downtown core of Lakeville, that would be a funding source that I would like to know. There's definitely another number of funds that I think we could consolidate. So that we, I've got 3 pages of them at this point in time. Yeah, I think we could consolidate that, provide a little bit more flexibility to transfer. There are some that are definitely still bound by the minister's order, but then there's other ones that we could have some flexibility.
Final follow-up. So I get that there are restricted ones that have similar restrictions, but there are others. I see we have one reserved for 5 culverts. Some of those, I know at the time it made sense. I'm reading that, but I can't find it today. But I know there was one that was made for these 5 culverts we had to take over. So, but I think there's opportunities there too. To look at some of those balances and move to areas that we think serve. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll move on from reserves to impact. This tab's included in the binder, and it definitely takes kind of all those influences and impacts that the entire budget tries to condense it down into a few pages. I would say for the most part, it reflects direction already received from council on programs or levels of service. There's definitely some expenditures that would naturally flow out of direction from council. And then in other instances, they're just kind of forward-looking recommendations that we include in the budget document. It is a challenging exercise to take all of it and put it down into a few aggregated sections, and so there's definitely some details that are lost, or maybe statements are a little bit too broad, but this is our best input to council to say this is where the budget is impacted. Definitely if you get way too detailed, and already did one slide, I had to blow it up, be able to hit all the different impacts across the number of departments. It just becomes too cumbersome. It isn't really a summary. But we'll maybe just work through a few slides and then I'll get to the impact section. So another pie chart, gross expenditures at this point. The key here, we're definitely still high priority in infrastructure. But the key to this one, different from some of the discussions we've had, is the protection expenditure here includes police. So we haven't talked about policing being involved in our expenditures because they're traditionally an area rate or something outside. But in this chart, policing is included, so you can see the full impact of protection that impact our budget. Definitely, as I mentioned, public works still a key area in terms of gross expenditures and facilities. And then general government in this area is a bit of a catch-all because it is just general government. It's also like economic development, some aspect of facilities. But at least visually, it shows where the money is being spent. We start to get a little bit closer to the impacts into the taxation requirement. So this is a net funding requirement. You can see in this chart, you can see where the tax levy and the area rates actually have increased. And once again, policing is included, as is fire and law enforcement. So you can see the larger section on the top of protection, which is yellow. So in this instance, those yellow amounts are the increases. As we reviewed in December, the impact discussion, human resources has an impact, obviously, cost of living increases. There are a couple of, there's 2 or 3, I guess 3 or more organizational changes to the budget. Inflationary pressures across the board, but specific to fleet and equipment repairs for sure. We had some increased costs of third-party agreements, and so that's the fire dispatch, and so those agreements are phased in over a number of years, and then of course OPP and do the way to the fleet. And our reserve contributions in fire and our capital levy adjustments for fire as well. So this is a bit of a view just to see this is where the money is spent. In Parks and Rec, it's relatively small this year. We'll get to that when we talk about the reserves a little bit there with respect to the arenas. But for the most part, that area is taking care of itself because of the new revenue source that's coming out of the legal campaign. So this is the chart I was talking about. There I had to kind of blow some of the sections up as so the font gets smaller. But this is under the impacts tab in the budget document. Still pretty high level, but actually it gets a lot closer to a department basis. And so the various bits and pieces are spread throughout the summary by department. I would say the biggest component in general government is because of loss of interest revenue. Fire services, some of our organizational changes and ongoing improvements to reserve contribution. Roadways and winter control, probably big impact there is we do need to put some money back toward winter control since we have no reserve left, and also a phase in of the equipment replacement and those rates over a period in time. And yeah, we did have good assessment growth, so that's offsetting overall increase. So that comes in at 5.33%. And we'll be going through this most of this as we go through some plan. A question that I get every year, which is actually, it's a good one because for council, right, you want to take a look at this number and say, how can we have an impact or explaining it to ratepayers, well, do you realize that 1% is this? So this year, it's almost $99,000. This has been reflected for real growth. So it's a large number to the average person, but as council is aware, when we're looking at our budget, we've got a net tax levy of about 10.5 million. There are expenditures in excess of 20-30 million. It's a pretty small number when you actually start looking at what is it, so. It doesn't translate into a lot of actual money. So I'll go through department highlights now. And I think I do touch on most of them. Some are, if it's, I can think of the Parks and Rec and the Parks equipment. We won't speak too much about that. We have one purchase there. I think it's the ice resurface for this year, a few things like that. But for the most part, we're going to go through most of the departments. So there's ample opportunity for questions. I will skip over Department 11 and Department 12, which is policing and ORCA. And we talked about that at the very end. When it comes to area rates. So I mentioned before, a biggest impact in general government is probably the interest on a current account and investments. So, you know, tariffs have an impact on the economy, and then the Bank of Canada responses to that. So we closed out 2025 with an average of about 3% in our current account and about 3.25% in our high interest savings account. Keeping in mind that our reserves are like the 14 million that we have invested isn't all taxation dollars. So that it does have a larger variance in the general government area, more than anywhere else. We are still paying 3% internally on our reserves, so our reserves aren't just stagnant. We funnel back some of that interest revenue back into our specific reserves on hand. Over the last few years, we've implemented a number of technology improvements and continue to increase customer service. And as I mentioned the council before, there's kind of just been a change in how technology is handled in terms of how it's paid for. So it's now in the main subscription based as opposed to that capital investment once every 5 years. So, but we're still trying to maximize those new systems, trying to push people onto virtual town hall. Make people aware of the different technology that they have at their fingertips so that they can actually access account status and things like that in off hours. We're starting to look at the process. Hard for me to imagine because the systems that we just switched, but we're looking at the change in municipal software. And so with something like that, we're going through that for the last week and a bit. I'm involved in some requests for information from some of the suppliers and taking a look. And we're involved with municipalities across the county. County spearheading it, but we definitely have seen some of the differences in what is important for the difference now. The lower tier obviously wants to talk about paying bills and taxation, utilities. The county's much more interested in HR and payroll, given what they can deal with in terms of other staffing, paramedics, different things like that. So, but at least we're all working together, and in the initial sense, we get a good overview of what's available out there. I would anticipate that it's probably going to be the same. It's going to be subscription based, but probably an initial training and capital outlay that they can spend. That's general government. And this just flows through in the same order that the binder is laid out. In terms of facilities and properties, in terms of our rental revenue, a big loss for us is 12 Queen Street. And just recently, I'm not sure if it's has been formalized by the county council, but I think it's actually one county council is no. The county's going to pull out of 12 Queen. So they're going in a different direction with their marketing and economic outlook. So after really, I think it's only about 18 months of having them as our key on-site tenant, maybe considering other opportunities for that building. So that's something definitely resonates. The team we've chatted about a little bit, probably more intense in the coming months as the county gives their notice and we have a period of time to kind of make that transition. Also included in facilities and properties, the capital maintenance, going back to a facility assessment review that's kind of in the purview of Mike and Jerry. They've bundled up a number of routine capital items again this year, laid that out. We'd initially laid out about $200,000 per month going to that area. It might be a little bit more this year. one of the key ones in the line and my report with the recommendation that we would move forward on the curling club roof and finish so that we can get going on our project again. And as I mentioned before, the largest component in the section is the Anson Arena, so a floor replacement chiller and floor realignment. So that's kind of a really quick overview of a lot of money, but that's outlined in departments. But and there is just an activity update beyond dollars and cents, just to remind council that again, I realize that makes a plan, and I know personally still hoping that we can make some progress between now and the update that's coming in July. Over to economic development. Some HR impacts in this area with respect to we're proposing a new development services manager, so that would be shared between economic community development and planning. That position we got phased in this year, so I've had some questions from council about that. So if we do things appropriately, get approval from council on the budget, roll out job descriptions after the fact, get that scored, and do a posting, interview, different things like that, and we can typically bring somebody in around that 7, 6, 5 month point. That also helps in terms of the phasing for the next year, and also that's the impact is spread over two different years. So we've been successful in doing that in the past, and that's proposed and moving ahead. We reduced the CIP program amount that was allocated there based on council direction with respect to the community grants program. Okay.
Sorry, thank you, Mayor Sass, through you. Yeah, I have a question with respect to, I'm looking at the binder, I'm looking at page 13 of the binder. I know I'm looking at the slides and I'm looking at the binder,
Yeah.
keeping the balls in the air. So this is Department 7, and I'm looking at a new position, Manager of Development Services. And according to my understanding of this, we are going to be looking at approximately $62,000 in wages spread over a couple of departments that'll be paid partway through this year and then on to December. And next year, we're going to be looking at, well, if this person is brought on, wages of about $125,000. I'm a little concerned about the fact that I know we discussed this in December 11th meeting, but I'm a little concerned that according to the narration that this person's responsibilities are under development, and that we're going to be looking at the possibility of coordinating with economic development and coordinating with the marketing position and the communications marketing position, and there'll be some responsibilities in the planning department. And I'm wondering about, I'm a little concerned about saying, yes, go ahead and hire this person when council really doesn't know what this person is going to be doing. And if we say yes to this, there's the $62,000. If we say yes to this today, we're essentially saying yes to $125,000 next year when we don't know what this person is going to be doing or how this person's role is going to be coordinated with the other people's. And as a result of that, I'm a little reluctant to approve this. So I'm wondering if you have any comment on that.
Sure. So I'll definitely get Janice to weigh in, because I think some of it relates back to their organizational report that was provided to council in December. And this is really the first part of where you see that position, but it's really the smallest part. The larger part is actually planning. Okay. But I'll maybe let Janice speak to this.
Thank you. Yeah, so, yeah, as Lane mentioned, the way it's been proposed, council did tell us to go away and, provide the information with respect to how the new position that's proposed would fit into the budget. So that's what we've done. So yes, there'd be about half the position incorporated in 2026, and then the other half of the position, it wouldn't be the full amount wouldn't be new in 2027 because you've already built in half of it in 2026 essentially. in accordance with the way we've got this developed. So, and yeah, we haven't gone forward to do job descriptions or job evaluations, scoring, because council hasn't approved it. So we would do that work once we have the approval to move forward. But certainly as part of the report in December, I think we certainly did provide some information with regard to how the rationale behind the position and the need for it and how it would fit into the organization. We used to have economic development undertaken actually as part of the building and planning department. We did move away from that after help me, an organizational review. I believe it was in 2016. And in that point in time, we created the economic development coordinator position. And that position has really been key in terms of lots of our community and traditional economic development activities. I think over time, and that position was built under the community and corporate services heading. So we have community and corporate services. The expectations on that department have grown over time. We have planning in the building and planning department, which is also by law enforcement. And again, we have expectations and legislative requirements in the building and bylaw that have grown significantly over time. Lots of expectations around our planning services as well. And we do know that that's going to grow, right? We have Lakefield South, that's going to continue to be a lot of work on the planning side and on the building side. We have other developments that are under consideration now, a couple of subdivisions in Bridge North. We have our zoning bylaw consolidator. So there's a lot of work. And when we look forward to how we're going to manage our succession and fill these positions, we're really trying to rationalize the types of duties that are under some of these management positions so that their portfolios are actually manageable and it makes more sense. So I think that's really the rationale for that change of having the manager of development services, which would be the way we've structured it in the budget is it's a 65% planning, 35% economic development to support those levels of service that we've been trying to provide. Follow up?
If I could, yeah, I'm wondering if it is. Yeah, I understand all of that, and through you, Mayor Senes, I thank you for that explanation, which is essentially what we talked about in December. I'm still worried about cart and horse though, because we're approving the money for a position and I still don't fully understand what this position is and exactly what this person will be doing. I'm also wondering if, because we have a new CAO that will be coming in partway through this year, if this new CAO should be allowed to weigh in on exactly how his or her management team should be organized without us putting the 62K into this budget in order to put this ill-defined position into place when that person arrives midway through the year. So I remain concerned about approving this $62,000. Thank you.
No, I guess from my perspective, I don't really think it's an ill-defined position. We struggle in these departments to have the resources to do what council and the province and our community expects us to do. I think setting up the organization for a new CAO so that they have the resources they need to be able to start out with proper resourcing to deliver those services is very important.
Thank you to you, Mayor. Yeah, I understand the rationale to have things set up for the new CAO, but I also feel the CAO coming in halfway through the year should have the opportunity to themselves look at the organizational structure that's there and make some decisions over the a period of 3 to 6 months for the 2027 budget. And it may result in a full-time position in 2027. But I do believe that, and I certainly understand that there are challenges in planning and building right now, and economic development, frankly, with the county taking on some responsibilities and so on. So, you know, I support Councillor Boyko's concerns about funding something this year when we have a new CAO coming in who may not agree with those changes, may be able to bring a different lens to an organizational structure that they feel would be more impactful down the road. So, you know, I think it's premature a little bit. I get that there's a problem, and I get that we have to respond to it, but I think a new CAO would appreciate the opportunity to look at that structure themselves and make those decisions for them. They're the ones that are going to have to live with it. The current CAO is going to leave before this position is in place and not really be there to implement. The new CAO is going to have to implement somebody else's plan. So I think for those reasons, I would move that it be removed from the budget.
Second.
Right, I'd like to speak to this. I have a concern with regards to not only is our CAO going to be leaving, but so is our Angie, I forget what her title is, big long thing. And she also has part of her job description had been that she was overseeing the economic development. And, you know, rightly or wrongly, that was under her umbrella. And the recommendation had been to council that that be moved over to planning. And if we wait until the new year on this, Angie will be gone and there will be a void. So I'm not sure that we should be totally disregarding or making a decision on removing that position totally for this year. Maybe instead of having it put in place in July, which I think is what's recommended, we could have a placemaker for it for the fourth quarter, so that will give the new CAO time to be able to look at the organization. And, you know, we still have to keep in mind that we're going to have a void there when Angie leaves, and to leave the new CAO in a position that she's going to have to make a decision as to what happens. I think we should, instead of what was your recommendation, remove it? I think that it would better serve the organization if we left it in there, but instead of having the budget to be done in July, that it happened but for the October. That's my.
Thank you.
Councillor Henry.
Thank you, Pretty Mayor Senes. Not sure where to start here. So we don't have the capacity to project firms. We don't have the capacity to hire someone to spend money on a ship. Because Lakefield South, which hasn't started, no projects have started. But we're also looking at potentially increasing our costs to do business or build in our community through this budget as well. And we're trying to predict what a new CAO is going to think. I'm starting with Don our Black Councilor Quickly, because if we can answer some questions but not others, strategically we're really making ourselves vulnerable.
Just you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, so I guess what's being proposed is that position comes out of the budget. It would affect Department 7, would affect Department 35 for sure, but I think concern is operationally it will affect more than just what we're talking about the budget. So we're going to have a different CAO that doesn't necessarily have a planning background doesn't necessarily understand our planning documents. Or some of the history to go along with some of the planning documents. You have a manager of corporate services, union corporate services, which can be involved in a municipal election. And trying to run a good municipal election with their staff. And you have the potential for 6-month period of time where you're not going to have anybody that's going to be able to answer some of the forward-looking questions or consider some of the additional planning requirements. And I understand the deputy mayor has an issue, and maybe I'll just leave it there and talk about that, but that's my concern, I think, is that we're trying to lay out a program that says we won't have a break in our level of service or the expectations for what's being fulfilled.
Yeah, that's-
Yeah, I was just gonna put my 2 cents in here. I think it's forward thinking because we're already trying to fill a void regardless of filling or creating a new position. We're already backlogged. People are asking for help and we're not gonna give them help. We have 3 people retiring who do 3 different people's jobs already. So it doesn't matter that they're phasing themselves out nicely for us. We're gonna have a backlog. My biggest concern is like, there's a lot of work with the election. So even though Angie does it, she's doing it on top of everything else she already does. So this position in my mind is actually like helping us streamline a smooth transition. There's gonna be work no matter what, even if they're not, even if you don't have a job description, they're gonna be doing something. And, yeah. So I'll leave it at that. Do you like that?
Yeah, I just wanted to, if I could, through you, Mayor, respond. Elaine was saying that, the election still has to be handled and economic development still has to be handled, but it's my understanding that Angie is going to be here until, I should say, the clerk is going to be here until the end of December, which means she is going to be here doing those positions. So it's not like there's no one here to do that work. She will be here doing that work until December, end of December.
For you, actually, I just want a clarification here. This year is a different year for a number of reasons, not just the election, right? Like we have so many projects on the way, like this isn't a regular year. Would this position help with us transitioning through all the major capital projects that we have to get done by specific times? I'm sure we can use the funding up.
Yeah, so the manager of development services that's proposed really wouldn't be managing a capital program, because that really wouldn't be their focus. So where they're gonna contribute is to take overload off of the manager of community and corporate services, who we are going to be trying to replace in the near future. It would take the overload off our manager of building and planning, who right now with the increase demands around bylaw enforcement, it's becoming it's been overload. Let's say it's been overload for a long period of time. I think we've managed it and we've managed it well, but I don't believe the expectations that we have currently on people who are trying to backfill some of those needs. I don't believe it's realistic to put those expectations on the new people you have coming in. I think this transition, this position really does, as Councillor Coles has said, try to help us with our transition, managing our transition. It provides us the resources to fill some gaps that we've had, that existing staff have really helped to try and fill, but just in the long term, it really isn't realistic to do that. I'll leave it at that.
I think, just before I mention that, something that hasn't been talked about too is the official plan. One day it will be approved. And when it is, it's going to put a lot of work on our planning department, because we're going through a new zoning bylaw, which is a gargantuan job. And this particular position will help to help with that department. Again, I'm going to reiterate, I'm not suggesting that we just make the decision not to go ahead with that position. Perhaps we don't have to do it mid-year, perhaps the fourth quarter. would be better suited for that. And we'll give the new CAO time to have a look at the whole organization. I do think that we should carry on with what had been recommended, but put it off the order. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Chair Mayor Senes. Yeah, I think everybody understands, hopefully the official plan comes down this year. We budgeted money for a consultant to help the planning department with that. And frankly, there's not a lot of building going on and not a lot of projects in the hopper these days. Looking at minor variance numbers that we've had over the last 2 years, activity has been decreasing. So again, hopefully it picks up this year for the municipality and for people that want to do building. But so I think that situation lends itself to support for the official plan. That the new CAO will come in probably in May sort of period. Angie doesn't leave till the end of the year. The CAO will have 2 or 3 months to determine what structure they want moving forward. That will be part of the budget process in the fall that we're going through. And that person could be hired, before Angie or just after Angie leaves, or council could make a decision at that time to move that position up at that time. But I just don't feel there's enough information around the job description, the person, and I do believe that the new CAO should be responsible clearly for the new clerk, community corporations manager. And if Angie currently has, or the clerk has some of those responsibilities that are part of this job, then the new CAO can decide whether the person they hire would continue doing that or whether that would be passed on through a different structure down the road. But I think we need to provide the new CAO with all of the opportunities to walk in, come in and look at the structure and make decisions on their own as to whether that's the right position to go or the right direction to go, or is it right to do economic development with planning and other areas. I think it would be more attractive to a new CAO to know that they can come in and that we haven't just basically forced a restructuring onto the CAO. The new CAO.
Thank you, through Mayor Senes. One last one here for me anyways. So just to clarify, we've deferred building and planning recommendations right now because we want to take another look at it. Building and planning is showing deficits, but we're going to spend $65K, which then will turn into $120,000 to hire someone. In plain speak for me. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, for sure. There's going to be a cost to the position. But right now we have departments who are overloaded and we do not have the resources to properly manage those 2 service areas moving forward. Again, this isn't new. We've struggled with this. And as I said in my reports, the expectations in these areas continue to grow. And we are trying to provide the resourcing. I guess you can look at it 2 different ways. You can look at it that the new CAO wants to come in and figure out in 2 months what the organization needs. And, or you can look at it that the CAO is going to look at it and think, okay, there's the resourcing there to get done what I know needs to be done in an organization such as ours. The building department is busy. I know their new building activity is lighter than typical, but there's still a great number of building permits. The department is busy. The enforcement aspect of those activities has escalated substantially. Bylaw enforcement, the expectations around bylaw enforcement since we actually hired a full-time bylaw enforcement officer have expanded dramatically. So there's pressures. There's the planning department, and right now we have 1 professional planner that we're trying to support with three other positions who aren't professional planners, but have that historical knowledge and experience that we've been able to support it. I just don't believe that's realistic to move forward with and be able to provide a good level of service. So yes, is there a cost to it? Yeah, there is. There's always a cost. But I think in terms of moving forward and meeting those expectations, the service level that council would like to see us meet, in all aspects, that the resources are necessary.
Just as an aside, Kevin Monaghan has stuff. Anyway, there is a motion on the floor, it's been seconded. I would ask for a recorded vote, please. And clerk, do you have the motion? Wording?
Yep, just give me one moment here.
Oh.
So the motion on the table is that the position for the Development Services Manager be removed from the draft 2026 budget. And so the record of work will get Counselor John Boyko,
Yes.
Counselor Mary Poulos,
No.
Counselor Brian Henry,
Yes.
Mayor Sherry Senes.
No.
Deputy Mayor Ron Black. Motion's carried.
Okay, so that was first bullet that was on the slide. Carry on with community improvement plan. That program cost has been reduced by $10,000 in this area, but to fund the community grants program, which is over under general government now. There's also a proposal in the document that's in the binder that there are some other CIP offerings possible, and that there will be a report coming at some point, and that will be as well. It's in our approved CIP program, it just hasn't been rolled out yet. Yeah, and then with respect to CIP in the public realm, we started a couple of years ago where if there's any money left in place for private sector incentives that weren't used, then that would go into the CIP public realm. Probably the best, most tangible example of when we're going to be able to spend that is the county roads network and works. So that's coming along shortly, and there'll be some significant roadside improvements, public realm improvements along that section. Adam's involved with Phil County in that discussion, and I think Adam and Andy both in terms of what works with the bid, I'd say that's the 2028. So you know, any of these funds, if they're left at the end of the year, they're the public realm reserve, and the funding source. So that was going to be it for economic development. So over to there is a section on solar. I guess the only point I'd like to make, and I don't want to slide on anything, but the only point there is that we in 2026, our major solar program will be repaid. So we would funded that the Infrastructure Ontario, so it's like we treat that like a business enterprise. So there's no tax dollars going to solar. From day one, solar's paid for solar. So the sustainability reserve that we have in place now is because of the solar revenue, combination grants. And, yeah, the performance here has been great. We did have some degradation maybe in 2024, but we went back to our individual that took care of that. We reviewed that for some potential upgrades, and they noted at that time that we should just carry on. That's something that Willie and Harris and Angie and myself monitor on a monthly basis. So, just pull the mic in a little bit closer. So yeah, we're gonna go over to fire service now. So a large area of tax impact in 2026. It has been for the last few years, but the good news here is that chief and deputy are starting to see some call volumes decrease, probably because of the new setup up in Lindsay. So I think we've had some initial data based on that revised response protocol. Because of that, we did our initial review of the calls. Obviously keeping in mind that we had the ice storm 2025. And chief agreed that we should adjust those call volumes, so they have been. The department's also impacted by cost of living, for not only full-time, but also for volunteer firefighters as well. This is an area where we also are proposing that we would phase in full-time position. And that would help us out in a number of different areas. We have a part-time position right now. In this department as well, we're seeing increased equipment costs that phase in on the equipment dispatch, equipment maintenance generally, and then also some insurance costs.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor Sens, through you. Sorry to interrupt again, Lee. Yeah, the couple of questions, and I'm looking again, coordinating the slides and the binder on page 21 in the binder. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding. It says that in accordance with council's direction in December 25, the budget provides for the consideration of making the current part-time training coordinator full-time position. Two questions about that. One, consideration of making the current full-time. I believed it was council's direction that this will happen. There will be a full-time training coordinator. And the second part of that is the council's motion, as I recall, was that this person would be responsible for training, but also responsible for working with the chief and the deputy chief in order to develop and implement retention and recruitment strategies to meet other issues, because training, recruitment, and retention are linked. So I don't know whether I'm, through you, Mayor Sens, speaking to Lane or to the chief for the word consideration and exactly what this job is going to entail.
Sure. So that's you, Madam Mayor. I can maybe take a shot at that. I think originally when the report on the organizational changes came forward in December, there had been a recommendation of staff that we would move ahead and do that. But there was just a change at that meeting that because of the fact it was very, very similar to the position we just chatted about, when it's incorporated into the budget, is there a concern and is there a way to take it out? So we just went back and listened to the council meeting, and it was to be considered, but at the same time we built it into the budget. So it's built into the budget. It's up to council to either confirm with the budget approval or take it out.
Thank you for that. And again, I wouldn't expect the budget document to lay out in great detail, but that the position is not only the full-time trainer, but also is going to involve retention and recruitment as part of the training.
That's how I understand it.
That's the understanding is clear. Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Oh, one last bit too on the fire services. We talked about the SRU membership, and that's included in the budget as well. So that's a county. I don't want to say a county initiative because it's really the county fire departments that are included. But we're not included up to this point, but we would buy in essentially into that membership. So there'd be an initial upfront cost, and then there'd be $1,000 annual membership. That would go along with that as well. I guess the best way to say that at this point in time is that we would make the upfront cost, which we would fund through reserve. We would then pay ongoing annual membership fee, and then working with the SRE unit, the chief and deputy, and maybe the training officer would figure out what role our service would play in the SRE and what areas we would receive additional training. And so if it's water rescue, if it's high end, they'll rescue, whatever, they figure that all out. And so we wouldn't have to have a whole breadth of the department trained in all those areas, but there would be specialists that would be then part of the SRU as well. So, yeah. Okay, get that, okay, yeah, okay. So that is included in the budget as well, and as I mentioned, that the original or the initial upfront cost is funded from a general government reserve, so it would come out of fire reserve with impact on the equipment or anything, and an ongoing membership is included. Okay, move over to building and bylaw enforcement. And so there's definitely some new fees, as already outlined, so.
Could I interrupt?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, again, I'm following through the binder, and the next one was police services. There's just something in the binder that I thought, and I've asked.
Why, not why.
I will have an opportunity to
Okay.
talk.
Okay.
11 at the
Okay.
end. Yeah.
Well, I'll wait then.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, so we had a discussion with some new fees and CPI increase in this area. Question that came up from council in terms of the building reserve. So it's over 650,000 that we've withdrawn since 2020. So that does reflect a couple of things. One is maybe throughout that time, maybe a bit of a downturn in the economy, but also a total revamp of how we charge our building fees as well. And so it wouldn't be, well, it would be within the last decade that that reserve would have been $1 million. So we are definitely down on an annual basis. In this department, though, we definitely more taxation is being spent in terms of bylaw enforcement, as Janice had mentioned earlier, and then on the administration and support of those larger complaints, that's coming from offices. So it isn't just an individual part-time who's doing this, we've got a full-time individual, somebody supporting it, and then pulling on the manager's time as well to do that. So taxation support required there. And also, the budget includes charges related to small animal control. The Humane Society has advised that they're no longer going to provide what it's called dog catcher services, basically. They will be still available as a pound during their open hours, or available hours, I should say. So at this point, we have kept that expense or placeholder amount in the budget. And Robert is working through those changes to provide a new service provider. So we should have some discussion about that and updating. Okay, moving on then, as mentioned, we kind of jumped over 11, 12, 13, 14, no expenses there with respect to the building equipment. That's required, and we're over into Public Works, Department 20. So a large department in terms of overall expense. Adam, as I mentioned, continues to consider new methods of implementing some departmental improvements. And so we will see year one of equipment rates being increased. That's built into the budget for this year. The department has a full staff complement that's also built in. In 2026, I think the focus would be more on some operational cost centers. So road maintenance activities, road resurfacing projects, things like that. Not as much in the capital, but in the capital area, we're supporting or relying on third-party contracted work. So there's less of our own forces being put in play here, and more in terms of contractor support. So see the George Street work in particular, I can think of. Some of the sidewalk work along there. When we get into resurfacing support of this resurfacing contractor with respect to microsurfacing support of the microsurfacing contractor, those types of things. So definitely a lot of moving parts in the department, with weather obviously playing a large factor. Because if you're not moving snow or plowing snow, then you're brushing bed. So we might have seen a little bit of brushing activity this week, but very little so far this winter. So one of we obviously cost of living is an impact in this department and some of the other public works department. But equipment charge out rates is something that we phased in this year. Like I mentioned before, a lot of work done on that. This is year one. We looked at a 3-year phase in and did not find that was going to be palatable for our budgets. So we looked at that over a 5-year period. And as we go and as it evolves, more history, take a look at that. As I mentioned, the equipment replacement schedule at this point looks over 25 years. We've only looked at the first 10. But as the history is filled in, then also now becomes a better document, better analysis of what we need to do. So those costs will impact future budgets. I just have to that. Okay, winter control. So yeah, I don't know how many times I can say it, but heavy winter conditions, ice storm impacts, a lot more snow plowing at both ends of 2025. Material costs have been significant in terms of the treated sand. We emptied our domes with respect to the ice storm. We went through the first part of the year and just filled the Smith dome again. So I put in the slide, we basically have what we call the perfect storm in 2025. $250,000 in unexpected expense, the highest that I've ever seen. And our staff have essentially had very little downtime, which means not only are they working weekends, but also then there's no downtime during the week to maybe use bank time or something. They set aside as well. And there's also not great opportunities for significant brushing as well, which is over in the point. Having went through the treated sand, one thing that Adam might be able to provide a little bit of insight to council, I found it intriguing, was about the salt in Ontario generally. And then a recent call that he had with respect to some of the other counties, how bringing the salt then. Wanted to add.
For you, Madam Mayor. So I've been on some chats with management of Peterborough County. We do fall under the Peterborough County procurement for salt and sand. And there is actually quite a large salt shortage in Ontario right now. So typically, it costs salt at a Baldwinville. That's off the winter. That Baldwinville site is almost reached capacity. So they have some allocations for local municipalities as part of the procurement policy. Procurement in general, we're all allotted estimated quantity of some of our partners, such as Northumberland County, as of January, we're already at 100% of so that resource is kind of dwindled at a Baldwinville. So our salt providers actually directed some of the clients to Montreal, part of Montreal to send down. So that's where Northumberland County for sure is going. Not sure if Peterborough County is heading that way yet, but some of the larger counties who would straight salt on the road, not are actually transitioning to a sand salt mix just to the extent that we're going balance in. But for council knowledge, sand salt mix, not salt. Right now, we're actually in good shape. We're able to build split dome. There's more gold get gold. I don't have enough split dome here. They're not enough.
Budget, we're showing 243,000, 44,000 for this year for snow plowing. We're supposed to be getting another snowstorm tomorrow. We're only in the first week of February. And I'm just questioning, do you think that's going to be sufficient?
Through you, Madam Mayor, we are, when we look year over year, we are, we do have an accumulation this year already. But we're trying to budget to averages. So we're not just looking at the 2026 years. We're also November, December, really. So the expectation is that hopefully we get out later next year. But we're trying to average what that, right? Try to follow ahead with the years prior, obviously, kind of chasing our tail with respect to an actual number. So
you know, historically, we've had heavy winters followed by lighter winter, which is on the budget, with one of the reserves that have gone.
Mercedes.
Yeah.
If I could, through you, Mercedes, a question first I want to, through all of us, thank, all of the people who've been doing the snow removal. I know that they're up in the middle of the night. I hear plows going by at 3 a.m. and the work that these, people are doing is tremendous. The second thing, and this is the question, through you, Mercedes, is that I've received a couple of emails, and I think we've all received one email from a woman who's saying that the, concern that the budget that we are allocating in 2026 for snow plowing and sidewalks and the roads is lower in 2026 than it was in 2025. And I want to make sure that I'm interpreting this right as I look on page 45 of the binder and I look at Department 21 winter control. I see the budget line for all of these things. Each individual line is higher than it was in 2025, which seems quite appropriate to me. Am I reading this correctly? We are not reducing the amount of money that we are allocating for snow removal, winter control. We're actually increasing that. Am I right?
To you, Madam Mayor, that's correct. Budget more this in 2026 than.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think I'll move on from winter control.
I think we should take a 5-minute break.
Okay.
I think the next subject. in.
I think my clicker is closing up again there, Tanya. You bet, yep. So, in the binder, we have Department 22, which is equipment we talked about quite a bit, but we also talked about that at the capital meeting. 23 and 24, streetlights and gravel pit. That's in there as well, but I wasn't going to spend very much time on that. I'm just going to move on to community transportation, which is really the link. Some discussion about that. So the pilot program ends in March. We were really pleased when the province did extend the pilot to get it through at least to the end of March this year. So it allowed us to complete the feasibility report, which came to council already, and it allowed us to kind of maximize the grant. We've got a few more years of experience with the service, and there's more data for ridership and other different things like that. So staff had already reported on the link and route options and some changes there to consider continuing the service. So it was approved to come back with options provided to council, and the budget implements the link in terms of the phasing program in 2026. So the next slide here just reviews that phasing. So we have used phasing in the past, quite obviously with staffing. If you do over a couple of years. We did it when a section of our municipality was annexed into the city of Peterborough. So we phased it in and kind of prepared for it, and we phased it out and that one too. And there's been a number of times where we just kind of used a 2 or 3 year phasing to do something. Now this one actually uses the grant, which expires in March. So it uses that up in 2026 as much as we can, and then that phases in over the next term of council. So I just wanted to confirm, this is included in council's package, but the chart, I just wanted to go over that a little bit. So the net expense there that's outlined is really how much, after our partners have put in their money, after the province has put in money, how much is left to fund by the municipality. So that's where the net expense comes from. It then outlines new taxation that would be required. And so you can see it's approximately $30,000 a year. The next column outlines what's already built into the budget. So in 2027, we'd already have that roughly $30,000. We're going to add another 30, and the phase-in would work through like that. And as the phase-in happens, then the reserve, which is the sustainability reserve that we'd be relying on here, would decrease over time. And as I mentioned before, the solar part, after this year, all of our financing for the solar is completed. So there's actually going to be more going into sustainability reserve on an annual basis. So this would not, it would come out of that reserve. So there would be a negative impact on the reserve. It wouldn't really negatively impact the reserve because we're getting more money that's going to be going in. So just a little bit, just about our funding partners, definitely at this point, the province has put in, I don't know, roughly $2 million over the period of the pilot. We have funding partners at Trent, so Sanford, Kurt Blake has said that if the project was ahead, they would fund. And then there's also a portion of gas tax, which is provincial gas tax, which would go into the program as well. So we did our best to outline that and then put together a 5-year phasing program. It also allows Peterborough Transit to kind of reach out into the township and get those residents into the urban area of Peterborough. And so we have a 5-year pilot and an approximate 5-year phase-in, and at the end of it, we have grants, fares, agreements, things like that are coming into play. And as outlined here, we're looking at taxation of about $145,000. I would anticipate by the time we get to 2030, that's probably going to be about 1% of taxation. If you think back to our $98,000 we used before, maybe 1.25, 1.5. So we would look at a community transportation system by 2030 that would be funded about 1.25, 1.5% through taxation, and all the rest of our funding. But there's a lot more detail that's outlined in the binder, and we've got Lily here available to answer any questions, and we've got Angie online as well.
I'm gonna say my 2 cents before I start getting questions. So, at one time in Lakeville, we used to have a worker bus, and I believe that was funded by it was provided by to allow people to get to Peterborough from Lakeville, right? Okay, but we didn't pay for it. Yeah, GE, yeah. So, when that disappeared, people were left in a void. And, it was very difficult for anyone to be able to get to the city of Lakeville or anywhere else in our township. So we're really fortunate to receive funding from the province to start a rural transit service. And it's grown over time, and unfortunately, when it started, we had COVID, and then we had ice storms and other kind of weather events that affected the usage of the system. But it is a viable bus service who don't own a car, so that they can get to work, look for work, have medical appointments, and visit or go shopping. And I believe the link is an essential service, and I think we need to continue the service. We're fortunate to have a partnership with the city, as Lane said, Trent, Fleming, and Curve Lake. And we need to, I think we need to extend the period of service while we seek additional funding and exploring continued efficiencies. Community Care in the county have applied for funding to do a rural transportation feasibility study for the entire county. I can't let you know at this point in time what the outcome is because I'm not allowed to. Anyway, if this is successful, we could have partnering with them as well. And I just don't feel it's the time to talk. That's just my 2 cents. I will now pass it on to my colleagues. Do you have questions for me?
I'll start if we will. Throughout this process of looking at this service, I've looked at 3 things. I've looked at ridership, financial sustainability, and environmental responsibility. And those are the 3 lenses through which I've looked at it. And with respect to ridership, the ridership has been going down. And we know part of the reason why, but we don't know all of the reason why. We had a number of people that were persuaded to come to council and plead the case to keep it going. And yet the ridership doesn't seem to be reflecting the interest that a number of people and groups have in keeping it going. We're also looking at the new way in which this is going to be organized. The ridership will not have anybody from Ennismore. So a big part of our community won't be around anymore. It looks like when you do the arithmetic that we're looking at about 40 or 50 people that are using the bus, and we don't really know why they're using the bus. That's part of the something that I'm going to come to in a second is we can assume that they are Trent students, about 75% of them. We can assume that some of them are using it for shopping, but we don't know. It's not a worker bus because the worker bus used to come in the morning and go in the afternoon. One bus in, one bus out. So it's not that. So the ridership is questionable and going down. With respect to environmental responsibility, because there are so few people using the bus, I've been on the bus 4 times and I have watched the bus go by with me and the driver in it often, or 1 or 2 other people maybe in it, go by bus stop after bus stop because there's nobody getting off and nobody getting on, and therefore it sits and spews diesel into the air at Trent and at Curve Lake and by Foodland. So putting a near empty bus circling the township all day long, 5 days a week, I don't know that that is environmentally responsible. The third is financial sustainability. And it looks like as the years go on, according to that chart, we are going to be looking at a substantial amount of money going toward what many people now call a ghost bus. Maybe by 2030, it'll be different. So I was prepared today to say we should cut this and we should stop it now. But I have heard what you have said about community care and the county looking at a study whereby we might be able to get more partnership from the county, from townships, from other funding that may be available. I'm willing to look at that because that will hit that number, less going out of our Selwyn taxation. So what I would like, and I won't put it in a motion because I'm hoping this will be a greater discussion. I'll bring the motion forward if you would like, but I'm considering a notice of motion whereby we could approve this for this expenditure of money from now until, well, from March 31st until the end of December. But with a study or a staff report coming back in, say, 1st of December, and a detailed report about ridership that it looks like they're more detailed than just simply numbers. Who are these people that are riding the bus and why are they riding it? Let's stop guessing and let's ask them. And second, the financial responsibility, sustainability. Do we get the community care and county funding? Do we get funding from other sources so that there's less of burden the 20,000 people who are paying for this so that 40 or 50 people can ride? And we were talking earlier about a climate lens tool. Let's use that tool to look at this and say, are we really reducing our carbon footprint by having a bus? Or will staff come back and say, you know what, with the number of people on this bus, why don't we get a smaller bus? Why don't we get a large van? Why don't we get a half bus? So I am willing to put aside why was my intention was to pass a motion to say, let's cut it now, to say, let's get more information, allow what the mayor was talking about with community care and what she can't talk about, and I respect that, to see if that will change our minds by December. And so a notice of motion we could put forward that so that we could say, here are the details of the report that we would like to see by December. So with that, I'll.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Senes. Yeah, I'm not going to echo Councillor Boyko's comments because I certainly agree with a number of them. We've been asking for more detailed statistics so we can understand, the numbers a little bit better to make a better decision around the financial. Our own by 2030 would be 145,000, but it's a total cost of over 400,000. There are other partners that are paying. So when you look at the total cost of the program, 100,000 for Trent, 75 for Sault Ste. Marie, 55 for Curve Lake, plus our 145. It's a $400,000 program, really, even though you'll only be responsible for the 145 and 30. So I think we have to make a good decision moving forward. I'm very much in favor of public transportation. I think it's part of an age-friendly community. I think it's part of ensuring that those that don't have vehicles have options. And I'm going to support this year as well, the 29,935 that will go with taxation this year. But again, two things: a report on some stronger statistical basis for the program that supports 50 people and $400,000 being spent, and as well as the fact that community care and the county is going to do a study that will again maybe bring some light on other opportunities to work with other townships, expanding the transportation network, those sorts of things. So there are more people that are contributing to the bigger plan. So I will support the budget for 2026, but we do need to see those numbers. So for next year's budget, as we move into the next number, that it's a plan that has some long stronger impact on the community. I'm not sure the current ridership and so on justify one.
Yeah, so I think Ange probably would like to speak to that. I just make a couple of comments. You would be counting on the feasibility study, which I understand is a feasibility study on how community care might be able to expand their service. You'd be counting on that being done, and that might not come to fruition. So that may make those timelines difficult, and it may impact, and I think that Angie will probably speak to this. Some of our partners in the funding they provide really are for a school year. So that may actually impact the numbers that we have in the budget. So I think Ange is here and she will be able to provide a little bit more comment on that.
Angie?
Oh, sorry. Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you through you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I did want to just echo Janice's comments about the timeline of that other study. I don't know the status of their grant, and if they're successful, that's great. But that report in December may not align with that timing. I'm not sure that it would was planned to be done by the end of the year, but we could certainly check into that. The other thing I just wanted to clarify, we do know who is using the service. So 75% of the boardings are coming from our students at Fleming and Trent. The other 25% would be general riders. What we were able to find through a lot of work on Paris's part, she looked through a lot of data sets. We can actually determine the number of general riders that are using the bus to be about 40 to 50 a month. Then that over and above that, the other 75% of those riders are the students. What we are not able to get from Peterborough Transit, because they don't track it that way, we don't know the number of actual individual riders from Trent and Fleming. There's just no way for them to give us that number. So we know the overall boarding, 75% of those are from Trent and Fleming. The other 25% are our general riders. And we do know with the way our passes are individualized, that there are 40 to 50 of the 25% that are using the link service on a monthly basis. So I hope that helps a little bit.
Yes, thank you for your sentence. So 4 years, I've watched this link beyond life support. I do the same thing every 6 months, 8 months in conversation. I was almost prepared to want to pull the plug on this today because maybe it would actually light a fire under someone, but make this start happening, start these conversations moving forward. Even in the earlier days, I suggest that we look at what other communities, how can we support our own system? So I'm willing to keep this going a little bit longer here, but not only do I want to look down, I want to see what economic development could happen here as to how maybe we can partner with Curve Lake, as previously suggested, on how we can promote maybe local tourism, how you can get to Curve Lake, stop in Lakeville to have lunch. We can look at other communities and what they do, because there's many small lower tier municipalities who are running their own bus service, not reliant on a county or the Peterborough bus service, because the certain point of the part of this, we are under their control. So willing to move it forward, but I want to find out a return on our investment, because again, we have a failure here or a high risk because of our asset management. Might need to be creating an asset management strategy that's very, very strong that goes through regular reviews as well. So yeah, I'm willing to breathe some more life into it to the end of the year, but I do with those added stipulations that I'm adding as well.
Through you, so everyone said something. Are we writing things down and adding them in, or are we just going on a whim that it's gonna happen? Because I just heard so many things on like all support it if. So is anybody putting more of a motion or amending a motion? Like what's going on here?
Asking me, no, all this is one more slide on the budget. And what I said at the beginning is I came prepared to say, let us withdraw this money from the budget and let us save another 30,000. Let's kill the thing that has been slowly dying anyway. But when I hear that community care in the county are possibly going to be coming forward with additional funding, which will reduce the amount of funding that needs to come from Selwyn taxpayers, I'm willing to wait for that. But that does not mean that, well, they might not have their study ready by December, so therefore let's do it for 2027 too. And all of a sudden, we've got this thing rolling and rolling and rolling, and who knows if there will be more people or fewer people by next budget year. Now, in next budget year, the 5 of us may not even be here. We may have 5 new people. But what I will say is that I will bring forward, I'll submit it through the regular process, a notice of motion for our next council meeting, in which what I would like to do is to say, here, I would like a report by December 1st. December 1st may be a Sunday. I'll pick a date whenever the council meeting is in December, to say, I want a report that says, with respect to ridership, environmental responsibility, and financial sustainability, here's where we are now, so that the council of the day can then make a decision for stopping it or continuing it in 2027. I'm afraid that if we don't do that, the next council will it's here, it's been there, and it's just one more thing that we're doing now.
So just to clarify, you're going to the motion to our next council.
That's all that I've said. Yep.
So then the other two, you have said you're going to support this on stipulation that we do X, Y, and Z in the future, that we see these things. So like, are you amending at all? Or are you just saying, I support, but I expect this? Because I feel like if you're expecting it, you should put a motion forward so staff can put it in their work plans, instead of coming back and saying, oh, I've been asking for years. Like, let's have some feet to the ground if you're gonna make these comments.
I understand. I could make a motion today, but I would want to take a little bit more time to have the motion written in such a way that it is clear, speak with staff and make sure that I am writing the motion in such a way, because the motion is going to say in December, here's what I would like this report to report on. I don't want to just make it off the top of my head right now.
I appreciate what you're saying, Councillor Boyko. So, but just for clarification, you're supporting this for this year, the money being in the budget?
Yes.
And then you, okay. Yeah.
But there was just a lot of talk around that, and I was trying to get to the substance of it. So just want to make sure.
You understand? All right.
Okay, thank you very much, Council. Locked again. Tammy keeps locking me out of my own slide presentation. Okay, we're over into structures now, from 26. So, I mentioned before, this is a relatively new asset class for Selwyn. This is a year for our engineering review. It's a biannual engineering report. So that would be completed in 2026. No immediate safety concerns have been outlined on any of our structures. But this year's investment would be in the guide rails along the 7th line. So Adam's already had discussions with our engineer there. And so the difference, I guess we would say, between this one and what happened at Fothergill was quite a bit more extensive because there was a lot more water out by that. There still is a fairly long advance and then retreat away from where the culverts are in the southern. So an engineer would work at that, but we have built that into the budget. So that would be this year's project. Definitely concerned here with respect to asset management, as we talked about before. We've got over $2.5 million of asset value and very little in terms of what our reserve contribution is. So this is definitely an area for me that would be outlined as a concern And that would be something I would pass along to my new counterparts going to be taking over in terms of taking a look at asset management and what area that we need to start setting some money aside.
Can you just remind us, when we have to have, funding, plan in place to do with our AM? Is there a date?
Yeah, so there's aspects of the plan that are we already have funding, but in terms of it being fully funded, I would say that we should have it fully funded right now, and we don't. So that's something that we need to consider, because in this area in particular, and in stormwater management, we don't have it fully funded. So those are issues that this council, future council, is gonna have to do.
Yes, but my question is, did the province stipulate we had to have a funding plan in place?
It was in their regulation. How we're handling it with respect to structures and stormwater is that we're using grant dollars to offset that. So in the biannual engineering report, it outlined two areas that we should have concern about: the guide rails at Fothergill and these guide rails. And so while we don't have proper funding set aside, we are setting aside grant funding to do the work. So it isn't that we are looking at it and saying that's a risk for us and we're not doing anything. We found a funding source to make sure we're moving.
Definitely.
Just for clarity, my earlier comment around the department that had 4 culverts in it, in the reserve, this is what I was talking about. $18,000 reserve and, a separate department for, 7 structures. So
Yeah.
that's what I was thinking of when I said earlier in the meeting.
Okay. Yeah, so definitely in terms of those structures, like we have our engineering report and we know what the value is, right? So yeah, we're looking at over $2.5 million now a few years ago. And we have $80,000 reserve aside. Yeah, maybe we'll get to Adam, just because in his area, he can weigh in on that.
Yeah, sorry, through Madam Mayor, just to add the context too. So for clarity too, so anything greater than 3 meters in diameter, that would typically fall into the pit. 3 meters and less falls on pass. We are required, through regulation every other year to have these structures inspected. And to Lane's point, I mean, it is an asset that is kind of overlooked a little bit. You look at where all these large diameter structures are. They're critical structures. This is on the 7th line, Fothergill Isle. That's a warning that if a structure fails, and there's no way to get to the Isle. So just emphasizing the importance of these structures, and they're not really just culverts. These are large diameter features that are going to require not just a lot of work to bypass water, but a lot of permits and stuff. Is it all?
Okay, move on to waste management. I'm just trying to go through the departments in my head here. So really in the FIR, it's laid out situated when we get into the 30s. That's when we get into different areas of water. So we have water, we've got sewer, water, woodland acres, different things like that. Now we're into 33, which is waste management. So in this area, tipping revenues have been proposed to increase based on adjusted averages, and then new rates for 2026. There's some guidance in the budget document about why we do that or why we propose to do that. The rates that we propose is always to stay marginally ahead of the rates being charged for Brentford. The price is coming to effect in April. I think when in the basket. And the goal in this area, and I can't actually say for sure that we achieve that, but the goal is that the taxation funds the collection contract and the various waste and diversion initiatives. And in that way, the tipping fees and associated fees, they're actually paid for the landfill site. So we've got a number of things on the go there. The CMO contract impact that future operations. Our collection contract, which was extended with a 4% increase. And then the obvious county decision on waste management 2026 impacts. Over to 34, stormwater management. So we're partnering with the county again to finalize our asset condition rating. Did some work on that several years ago. There are a number of structures that the contractor today couldn't access. This is not just an urban issue. Well, definitely more prevalent in the urban areas. There's definitely sections of, catch basins and storm pipe throughout the township. This year in operations, we get back to that catch basin cleaning and documentation, and hopefully try to finalize that asset condition rate. In terms of capital, this is our capital program this year is along that George Street project. So we've got, tons of stuff going on there, water, sewer, sidewalk, catch basin, roads, everything like that. So the big section is from Fraser right down to the George Street pump. This would be another area of concern for me, in that we just don't currently have sufficient reserves. To give you an idea, we set aside maybe anywhere from 450 to 650, so 450,000, 650,000 for water and sewer mains, because they're an underground infrastructure. And this is another underground infrastructure, and we're lucky to set aside 50,000. So it's one of those areas that, once again, I would say that we don't have enough reserves allocated to it. How do we do the work when it needs to be done? We look for a grant, put in something. In the past, a few years ago, when we didn't have any grant or any reserve, we actually went back to the way we used to fund it and pulled some money from the road reconstruction reserve. And we did that as part of that. But this would be another area of concern. So moving over to the 40s, in our FIR, that's all the Parks and Rec and cultural study. In parks, human resource impacts, definitely in terms of remuneration, and in terms of how we set out our staffing up there. COLA impacts for this year. Many changes going on, and Mike, Amy, and Alora, new person, Alora, they've all been involved in some of those discussions, Grant in particular as well, out in the operations field. So a lot of discussions on how things are being set up this year. But despite all these impacts, we're using the new revenues from the campground to offset any impacts from a taxation perspective, specific to parks. There has been, in some of the discussion points that have come forward from council when we received the package, there's been consideration about spinning maybe campground should have its own department, and I think generally staff would agree on that. We've considered spinning the marina and the campground business enterprises off into their own department. Realistically, we wanted to get a couple of years of operating in before we did that. We had some good discussions when we started having discussions with Orca, when they provided notice. And we just felt it would be better, more accurate budgets, and then we'd more clearly understand the amount of funding that was available to offset parks and overhead. So definitely, I think staff are on side with spinning these off into its own department. We just really are looking at Department 40 right now, which is getting quite large in terms of the cost centers in different areas. Yeah. So it is something that, once again, I'd recommend you look at, if not next year's budget, but the year after. Definitely the binder, a lot of good information in there on our festivals, and just finished a really successful Polish Fest. We've got the Devon Art and Shamrock Festival and Festival coming up again this year. We have adjusted the funding in our 2 arenas for taxation support, and so that takes a look at ice rate subsidy for our junior or minor sports groups, and then also costs related to insurance, elevator, things that are required to do athletic services, and any transfers that we have in there with respect to the ice, the surface of and so that's laid out in the budget binder. So there's a bit of a tax impact there, as outlined before. Library service, I mentioned that the library board has already reviewed both their capital and operating and legal budget. Sarah and I have spent some time going through the different revenues that we have in here. And ultimately, at the end of it, the amount of tax increase supports the COLA increases and insurance increases, and a little bit in bill rate. We did have good accumulated revenue carried forward. But then part of that was because we hadn't fully funded or fully expended rather our book budget and or electronic funds budget. So that's pulled into the 2026 budget as well, so that we don't fall behind on our collection. And we have a little bit built in there to provide some flexibility to the board with respect to their fundraising initiatives that they'll be taking on this year. Taking a step away from the golf tournament for this year, despite 2 successful years, but going to regroup this year and then move forward with something else in late in 2026. I guess the next key point there for council is the strategic plan for the library services. So what the board has reviewed that coming forward, and I think it's maybe in end of March 10th, the board chair will be coming to council over providing an overview of the new strategic plan and some of the initiatives that will be coming up over the next 3 to 5 years. One of the areas in there will be addressing our volunteer model challenges, which is becoming more prevalent, and that's something that Sarah and her staff face every day. So we've heard about it for a number of years, but there's going to be a change. COVID maybe accelerated that change, and we are seeing now that there are more and more staff hours covering the branch. So that with that becomes a strategic area to review, and the board is basically all over that. But you're going to hear about that. The board says that. I mentioned, I'm not going to, 45, it's in the budget binder as well, that the only purchase there is with respect to the ice resurfacer that's been on the agenda here for a couple of years. So over the planning, so we'll obviously have to have a change in planning given council's earlier recommendation. So there will be a change there. It will affect probably Department 7, Economic Development, Department 50, and then we'll have to have a discussion with Jess and Robert and I to figure out what goes on with his allocation and then now change it because we had allocated. Oh, it would go back for that. Yeah, so so it would have to go back essentially. So there would be a change in this program. But yeah, but essentially go back, right? So I haven't quite figured out what the impact that can be, but we'll figure that out. So included in Department 50 though is the comprehensive zoning bylaw. So this is a multi-year project that would begin. We're proposing there that given the magnitude of it, and it's going to be multi-year, that would come out of the general government reserve and not the planning reserve. We don't have sufficient funds in the planning reserve to offset that. So we'll be funding out through the general government reserve, and that's that comprehensive zoning bylaw. So I still have a number of slides, but maybe that's the department summary. All those highlights are in that summary tab. You know, we have talked about some of these projects that materialize with the taxation impact. Well, good with being completed by the P. Don't know if I mentioned that at the very start. I meant to, but definitely department heads and specifically Angie and Janice for their work and kind of weaving this all together with the budget narratives. We still have a number of slides I want to go through and talk about area rate. But hopefully this document tells the story at least about where our municipal operations are. But I'll maybe just pause there to see if there's any other questions before I go on to area rates.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Stennis. More of a generalized question on a specific department, but I've noticed on different committees and board reports or expense reports, purchases being made at Costco. Are we paying for time and mileage to make these purchases to staff? And are they using their own Costco memberships? And how does the collection of rewards work? And additionally, if so, how does this promote and support local businesses or environmental sustainability? Good question. I'm not really sure. I could dive into that and see that a little bit. I know that we do have like a corporate credit card use or reimbursement.
UAP, but I could check it out. I'm not really sure about that. We traditionally tried to support local once we can get a really good deal on something.
Good question.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. So yeah, to move on to the Orca levy and police area rates. So with respect to Orca or economy conservation, again, I'm on that. Our portion of their total levy is almost 290,000, so that's up almost 20,000 over last year, and that actually is all part of their capital levy, so their operational levy stays the same, but that's all part of capital levy, correct? It's a 7.4% increase, which is fairly significant for them, but it's fully reflected in the documentation that's already put forward to them. With respect to OPP, I believe Councilor Boyko had some questions on policing, so they may come out over the next couple of slides here. In 2024, that year-end adjustment was $208,000. That factored into the increased cost for 2026, meant that the overall estimate was capped at 11% overall, or about 2.37 million. So the cumulative increase was capped at about $235,000. So we've laid out our budget worksheets in such a way that the 2024 adjustment would actually be funded through the reserve, and then the rest of it would come through under the area rate. So it's a significant dollar value and an impact from outside sources, but it's definitely the area rate increase with before based on existing council recommendations.
Councilor Mike.
Thank you. This is a clarification question, and it goes to page 24 of the report. Lane, I've asked you this already, but I thought others might be interested in the answer. It says under Department 11, costs of policing are funded by 2 area rates, with the assessment in Smith, Ennismore, and Duro-Dummer wards applied against the annual net cost for OPP. So perhaps you could explain what the Duro-Dummer ward is doing in our budget document. I found that fascinating.
Sure. So yeah, this goes right back to the minister's order, and when the annexation agreement was changed into an amalgamation agreement, and the area from Highway 134, what used to be 134, now 28. So roughly the lagoon down to where the standpipe is, McFadden's farm, up there. That whole area to, and then heading west to the village limits is part of Holdings Valley. And so Bishop Street would be a good example. At the very end of Bishop Street, that's actually the Duro ward. And rather than that being under the current control of Peterborough Police, that's actually OPP. So if something happened out in that section or up by our lagoon, for instance, it would be the OPP that would be the problem. Yeah, so that's a bit of a idiosyncrasy with respect to how things are laid out on the map. So that's on OPP. So a big increase there. Once again, as I mentioned, that's kind of outside of this council's control this year, and we are pulling as much money out of reserve as makes sense to offset that. With respect to policing, again moving forward, this is the initial increase over 2025 that we've been provided. No additional chargeback notice, no additional information from the city at this point in time. So we've laid it out based on that, and basically the policing costs being like a key point of discussion as we go through this section, but 6.8%, fairly significant in terms of just the Lakefield ward, but we're not drawing from the reserve. We're basically funding that, so that we're funding it based on the contract.
Question.
Frankly, so if there was, if they come back in the next few weeks with a chargeback notice, would that come out of reserve?
That's correct.
Would- would
Yeah.
come out of reserve?
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Senes. Just want to go back a little bit, just because you're at the end of your 3-slide presentation there for Orca levy and police area rates. So we're looking at roughly 3 percentage points of our budget. We're gonna allocate Orca and provinces. Essentially changing how conservation authorities are working. I'm just curious how we're gonna be allocating money to Orca if they're not gonna exist anymore. Obviously, we have to have a contingency plan, some money set aside for what the province is planning with the new ones. So I'm a little confused how they would even be on the budget.
Yeah, we've been, Madam Mayor, Ms. Pelly's been provided with the budget for 2026, came to the council and been accepted, and we need to build that into our budget for 2026. Fortunately, we have some members on the board that can report back to the council and material.
Wait for the ERO posted to come out, and then you can make the comment there, and they'll provide. Yeah. Because it continues as the legislation exists and until the legislation is constructed. We have to. Sorry to answer that way, but. Just a follow-up on the police, it actually is a question to you, Brian. So under Department 11, I was really curious with the RIDE program, that the fact that the province isn't, continuing it, or not continuing it, but not funding it the last couple of years. I'm just wondering if this is a delegation opportunity for us, and I'm curious from your work with the police boards, what you think.
Thank you for that question. My experience with the police board, I could expand on it. My experience with the province, that anything that they can download on this ballot. Should start there, like create a delegation.
For you. All right, we'll circle back. I'll probably ask you to lead it, but I'll flag it next time for Amo or something.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Sense.
Oh, Councilor White.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Sennis, yeah, in response to Lane, mentioning there's 2 members here on the Orca board. The Orca board has no idea what's coming either. Because none of the conservation authorities have any idea what's going on. So we are, at Orca are simply carrying on with all of our responsibilities until we finally find out what's happening. Who knows? So that it's in our budget, it's absolutely must be in our budget, because who knows what's happening.
Still have the give us bills that we have to pay.
Okay, we'll move on then. Impact on a typical homeowner. So we chatted for quite a few hours about this. We went through the breadth of the document that's before council. So we'll move on to the impacts of what we felt the typical homeowner. There's been no reassessment province-wide, so there's no change in the CVA of what we call a typical homeowner. So that CVA is about 314,000. So when we apply this through the rate, I will say one caveat. I don't think that it changed. I just received the notice today from the county in terms of their tax rates and transition ratios, which just was approved that in this week yesterday. So I haven't had the opportunity to look at the transition ratio just to make sure that they didn't change. We had been moving multi-res to a residential class, and the aggregates class is included in there. So they could have just tweaked the transition ratio, but with all that being said, this is based on the rates as they were last year and before yesterday. So we apply all this through to our typical homeowner, and the general municipal increase is a little over $47 annually. The OPP area increase more significant than normal, almost $22 at $21.86. And then the rural ward, then that would be $69.19. So that's an increase of combined, it's 6.45%. Yeah, so yeah, that's good point. Good point. Yeah, no, I should have made that point at the start. Yeah, this was all premised on the blanket thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, this will all need to be rejigged, and I can draw that when we bring the new budget back to this. I might just include all of that when I bring the PSAP compliance report to council, try to figure out what's the best way to do that. So that's the rule. we look to the village, once again, same homeowner, same home, but now in the village, with the same municipal increase, 47.34. Lease area rate increase there, despite the fact that the percentage increase is smaller, bigger impact on the homeowner because it's a smaller ward, so a little over $32. So the increase there is almost $80, an increase of, that figure looks at 5.79%. I've worked with members of this council for a number of years, so this is normally when I point out some real comparisons, right? So, which this is not salesy. This is just to point out what it's relevant to. Right? So, Tim Hortons coffee is probably my favorite thing in the world, so I'm going to use that. It's that's like the price of Tim Hortons coffee, not even a large, but a price per one per week, right? So that's telling how much it is. For some of us, and I can think of one or two members on council, and myself, that's part of a tank of gas. One, right? Not every week, it's part of a tank of gas. So that's some real world examples and some people look at it. So if we look at 2026 and the tax levy, in terms of the summary, trying to summarize everything for council. So it sticks to what I would say, it sticks to our principles. It's slow and steady growth. We maintain our service levels in respect of this budget, with the link going ahead. It is kind of taking that service level a little bit farther in terms of that functional area. It points out, I think, a number of concerns for future years, but we have taken a first step to increase equipment charge out rate. That's in the budget. We know that we need to fund some new reserves for core assets, but we still manage to fund other assets that we have. And I think that it still maintains an attractive residential tax rate, because based on where our tax rate has been in comparison to others, it's an attractive tax rate. So I think that's the summary. And that completes the PowerPoint presentation. At the end, I'll pull up the resolution. I think you have to amend it probably now. But the management team's here for any additional questions. Yeah, just once again, it's always this point in the meeting. I just thank everybody for not only their participation in the document, which takes a lot of work, but for council and the questions and bringing some of these things forward. The team's here for any additional questions for council.
Are there any questions? That's quite.
I would like, through you, Mayor Sens, to thank staff, because I know preparing this budget takes months and takes tons of work. And I want to thank every member of staff that was involved in its creation. Thank you very much.
Recommendation that's there probably should change a bit, because we've been approved it, so we have to put that.
Sure. So I think we can just take that second paragraph. The council supports the adoption of the 2026 taxation budget based on the final draft budget package as presented, discussed, and amended, inclusive of updated capital project narratives on February 5th. Keeping in mind, we have the resolution that was passed ahead of time just before in regards to the removal of the manager development services to impact the budget as well.
I'll say him.
Thank you, Triu. Sorry, just in looking through it, tomorrow basically, so I'll do my best to get this to the 10th. If I can, and distribute it, may have to go to council on Monday, just for the Tuesday, but.
Yeah.
It's,
Sorry, to clarify, that means that we're not getting, we won't get the package or the information until Monday, so we won't have the weekend to look over it, is what you're saying, of the amendments.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, it would be additional handouts, and then the impact of the amendment on at least 3 departments. So,
Councillor Henry.
thank you, Triu. Just to be clear then, what updated summaries are we waiting on? That's changed.
Yeah, so through you, Madam Mayor, so just thinking of it at this point, Department 7, Department 13, Department in Department 50 all need to have a review for the manager development services, and then the impact on Robert needs to change, which would mean I'd have to change Excel spreadsheets, which would flow into Excel summary, which would also be then narratives. I'm not sure if it would impact on reserves. Probably the accumulated revenue for sure. And then I'm not sure what part 13 is. Those are some of the things that, without really diving into it, they didn't have that. Those are some of the things that are on there.
Thank you, through my sense. And follow up then, so there's a lot of questions here that aren't answered. We're waiting on information, being asked for approval budget without final numbers. I know it's been a lot of work. We got a little bit more to do before I'm prepared to approve.
It's. Deputy Mayor Black.
Yeah, I also want to echo and thank staff of the budget and Wayne's submitted questions ahead of time, which were very helpful in getting us through today as well. So do appreciate all the hard work and a little more tweaking to the numbers and like some service.
They are wait. No, the numbers won't. By Council Black, or sorry, by Deputy Mayor Black. All those in favor? And Wayne, I would also like to echo my colleagues. I know that there's a lot of work that goes into this, and I commend you, staff, and the department managers, everybody involved in this comprehensive cohesive budget. Right, so we are now item. For any other new and unfinished business. I'd like to begin by thanking Mike Richardson, Amy, and all the staff that were involved in another successful Forward Fest. It was wonderful. And everybody that I saw had a really good time. The weather helped to cooperate. Oh, she did. And it isn't actually just down to the best costume because I'm on the judging committee. So it isn't just the best costume. It's also audience participation, that everybody cheering, which most people, I think, all they think is I've got to get in that water, and they just make a beeline for it and do nothing. They really had the audience participating, and their jump was spectacular. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, any other business? All right, so we have a bylaw, affirming bylaw 2026-009. So remove it. So Boyko, who was seconding, all in favor, that was carried. Motion to adjourn. Henry, seconded by Deputy Black, all in favor. Pass, thank you.